Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another Question the Narrative video, and today's topic is Wake Up, We Are Not the First. I'm going to start with a little story. When I was in school, I was placed in the Gifted and Honors program. And the entire time that I was in that program, which was from fourth grade through graduation, my ego, along with that of all of my classmates, was constantly being stroked. We were constantly being patted on the back, teachers telling us all the time how we were the first. We came in above all others. We were the best. And being told this over and over, especially as a child, but this can be for adults as well, we grew very complacent because we just liked being told those things. So as long as we were getting these little compliments and these little ego strokes, we were really happy to just do whatever we were told. And we were really happy to just accept things as they were. We didn't cause problems. We didn't ask questions. Fast forward to adulthood and what I am seeing in the world around us now. In the 21st century, we are surrounded by high-tech equipment everywhere. We have these beautiful modern buildings. We have AI, which I don't really know is such a good thing, but they say it is. We have the World Wide Web. We can communicate with anyone at any time, any time that we want to, and it's relatively easy. We can get to where we want to go rather quickly. And just as I was taught when I was growing up in school, we in the 21st century are constantly being told that we are the most advanced civilization that there has been on this earth. We are the first, as a matter of fact, that has had this level of technology because no one else in the more primitive, and I'm doing air quotes here, cultures was able to communicate with one another to the level that we are today. Last week I did a video on the mud flood for those who are just stepping into the truther community and didn't really know what the mud flood was all about and were a little bit confused with some of the terms that we might use, such as resets and the mud flood, Tartaria, and even advanced civilizations. This video is going to be a bit like that. I am just going to walk you through a visual presentation of evidence that the 21st century, where we are now, we are not the first advanced civilization. And in fact, we are nowhere near being even close to being the most advanced civilization. And you cannot understand history in its entirety if you do not acknowledge this fact. Let's start out with star forts. This particular star fort is in the Netherlands, and star forts are one of these anomalies, we'll call them, that you will find all over the world. In a time when they tell us that there was no real communication between people. Now, yes, what they will tell us is that these star forts were created during war times, and they were also called bastion forts. And what they say is that they were they were good for defense. But if you actually look into the history, these star forts, yes, they were used for that, but they were not good for defense. And so the question arises is, were these star forts there before they were ever used as bastion forts, as defense? Because logistically speaking, if you are in the middle of a war, are you going to take the time to build such a beautiful, symmetrically perfect structure? In fact, one that can only really be seen from the air. And again, this isn't something that you will find just in the Netherlands. Here we have another one. This fort can be found in India. Here is one in Portugal. This beautifully large star fort can be found in Palma Nova. And yes, we do have star forts in the United States. Here is one of them. Next, we're going to move along to cathedrals. And it is thought that cathedrals were not actually built as churches, but that they are much, much older. There is much thought that they were actually healing centers, and that even the organ inside of them and the acoustics were able to create some sort of vibration that allowed for healing energy. Now, even beyond what the original reason for building these cathedrals was, if you take a look at these cathedrals, many of them were said to have been built in medieval times. But again, if you look beyond the narrative, okay, because the narrative tells us that people were building these cathedrals with horses, carts, hammers, chisels. Yeah, they didn't even have steam at this point in time. So it was basically completely perfect craftsmanship being used in a time where there was no such thing even as electricity to help them to build these structures. And this cathedral can be found in England. And, obviously cathedrals can be found everywhere. And so the question, though, of the cathedrals is not only what were they actually originally used for, and who actually built them? Could it have been an advanced civilization from much more in the past than what we're told? Yes, it could be that. I think that it could also be that they were built around the time that they said they were, but that the people had much more technology than what we're told. Here, this cathedral is the Cologne Cathedral in Germany. And this is a Gothic cathedral. Again, if you look at the detail in this, for it to have been built in a time where they did not have any of the sorts of tools that we do today. And in fact, what you have to also remember is that they claim the world was much, much less populated than that it is now. So how much of their population must have been devoted to building structures like these? Here we have one in Washington, D.C. I think it's not quite as intricate as the one in Cologne, but again, the same story goes. Now, I will say also here, I'm going to point this out. Many of these cathedrals have the same sorts of windows, and there is the thought that they were used for cymatics, and that had something to do also with the healing that people believe happened in these cathedrals. This cathedral is in India. I mean, I know I wouldn't expect to find a cathedral in India. I mean, especially if it's being used as a church, but here we go. We have this beautiful, intricate cathedral in India also, again, with the same sort of window. They all have the same sort of architecture, the same features. A lot of times, but they have much larger doors than what is actually required for humans, at least. This is another one from India, and as you can see, this one is very, very old. It's very, very weathered, but it is nonetheless a cathedral in India. And another thing that I noticed is that it is also very castle-like with the turrets, and again, it has the same sort of window that you will find in other cathedrals. Okay, so moving along now to arches. And again, let's remember that these arches were said to have been built at a time when we didn't have the World Wide Web and we didn't have the technology that we do now. But here we have in Munich, Germany, this beautiful arch. Again, the intricacies are just astonishing when you look at the detail that is on these arches. Nowadays, when we think of the different architectures of different countries, we think that they each have their own trademark architecture that makes them stand out amongst the rest. But what you will find with these outstanding pieces that I'm sharing with you today is that they all have so much in common that it certainly seems like they are coming from the same advanced civilization and not just pockets of different nations, each with their own cultures. This arch can be found in Afghanistan. So yes, so we've gone from Europe to Afghanistan. Again, same style arch. Again, we see the intricacies. And actually, if you really look at what's on here, I would love to know if these have meaning, because many of these arches seem to have a lot of the same adornments. And again, completely different countries. This one is in Libya. Now, obviously, this one is more than an arch. At least from this view, it looks to be more of a cube. And if you look in the background, I think that it was definitely part of something larger. But you cannot deny the similarities between the other arches. If you look at this adornment up here, you look at this down here, the columns. These cultures had more in common than what we're being led to believe. And the Smithsonian would never come out and tell us that the cultures back then were far more advanced than even we are today, because that would, well, not only would it mess with their entire narrative, but in fact, when you have people who are completely complacent and who don't know their own history, they are much easier to control. This arch can be found in Manhattan, and New York has more than one arch, but this is just the one that I chose to share with you today. But again, they always seem to have what seems to be some sort of Greek mythological. Is that an angel up there? Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, because the angels that we see on lots of art are not actually the angels described in the Bible. They look more like cherubs from Greek mythology, something like Cupid would remind you of. But again, same style, same art. We've got the detailed adornment. And yes, these, we've got is that a cannon there? And then we have the soldiers here. But while the adornments can be changed, the arch itself is very, very similar to the rest. So now moving on, when you hear of the Parthenon, you very likely will think of Greece, because that is where the original Parthenon is at, the ruins at least. This is the Parthenon in Greece. So you have to think, okay, well, that is definitely a Grecian style architecture. Well, not so fast. Right here, we have another one. This one is in Rome. And again, not exactly the same, but there's no denying the fact that the architectural style is very, very similar. And again, you might be thinking, okay, but Italy and Greece, they're relatively close to one another. It wouldn't be so hard for them to copy each other's building styles. But then you come across this one in Lebanon, and this was actually called Baalbek. And this was used in ancient pagan god worship, lowercase g. And yes, again, same building style. You might call it Grecian, but again, you might be thinking, okay, well, that's probably from when the Roman Empire was so large, and Lebanon was certainly close by that it would have been impacted by that. But then you have this one in Nashville, Tennessee. And again, you see the same building style. And what they will tell you is it's a replica. And that is just one of those uh, templates. I like to call them templates. There's templates for how they like to explain away certain things, certain anomalies that we're not supposed to notice. They tell us, oh, well, that's just a replica of the other building styles. Because especially here in America and also in Australia, we're not supposed to have an ancient history. So anytime that something that is ancient looking like this shows up in our own country or is discovered, it's explained away by just being a replica, because of course we're supposed to be a quote new country, when in fact I think most of us, at least in this community, know that that's not the truth at all. And now we're back in Europe, but this one is in Germany. And again, you see the very similar style columns, the very similar, and this actually reminds me a lot of the arches too. They're the adornments. I'm trying to see what this is. We do have, it looks like maybe a Spartan or a Trojan soldier right there. Some sort of queen sitting there. This is in Germany. So now we're going to take a look at some photos of some very similar architecture, again, in countries around the world. Many of them come from what were called the World's Fairs, and the narrative of the World's Fairs is that many of the buildings that you will see in some of these old photos, they will tell you were, quote, temporary buildings, even though many of the temporary buildings are still standing today and in fact were not so temporary. They were actual buildings. So here we have one in Brazil, and again, you just will notice the architectural style. You will notice the dome, and again, let's never forget that these buildings were built in a time when people did not have the sorts of tools and advancements that we have today. This is from the Chicago World's Fair. So again, you will see the similarities. And again, what they will tell you is, oh yes, these buildings, they were just temporary. Even if these buildings would have been temporary, okay? Let me just tell you about the Chicago World's Fair, because that's the World's Fair that I know the most about. The Chicago World's Fair covered 690 acres, and they say that it only took about 2 years to build everything up. They dug out lagoons, and oh, I also have to tell you that they built it all on swampland, they say. That's another item in the template for Wikipedia and other historical narratives, but they say that they built the Chicago World's Fair on swamplands. They dug out these beautiful lagoons. They built all these beautiful buildings, paved these roads and everything, and all of this shortly after the Chicago fire that destroyed the entire city pretty much because of a cow named Mrs. O'Leary. I'm serious. This is the kind of nonsense that we're supposed to believe when we're shown photos like this. Now, this one I do not believe was from a World's Fair, but I could be wrong. This is in Germany, though, but again, you will see the same architectural style. And you see so many things repeating in some of these buildings. So we have the domes, but then this one also has the columns, and it has the same sort of decor as what we were finding in the arches and on the other buildings that we've been looking at. So you should know what this is. This is the Vatican, and the Vatican, again, looks very, very similar to the other buildings that we've been looking at. Again, we have the beautiful dome here, and we have these gorgeous buildings that are being built by people who drove around in horse and buggies. Speaking of the Vatican, one thing that is very, very interesting about it is that the Vatican is where the Pope, I don't know if he lives there. I'm not Catholic, but this is the residence of the papacy and the Catholic Church. And yet what we have here in the middle of the courtyard is an obelisk, which, as far as I know, is from Egyptian mythology. So you might think, okay, well that's odd. I'm also going to tell you that this is also the obelisk has a lot of meaning in I don't know if I should say it because I'm going to get censored, but I'll say it. I don't care. The Freemasonry, the obelisks have a lot of symbolism in that as well. And here we have it right here in the courtyard of the Vatican. And look, here we have another one in Istanbul. Okay. This obelisk can be found in Sydney, Australia. This one can be found in Ethiopia. So I hope that you are understanding the point that I'm trying to get across to you. The fact of the matter is that there were, and I'm not just going to say there was one, I believe that there were multiple advanced civilizations in the past, and I believe that the depth of their advancement is being covered up for sure by our governments, by the Smithsonian, and yes, I'm going to say even by the church, the Vatican. We all know that the Vatican archives, they're miles deep. We don't know what secrets there are there. But I believe the internet was created again as a source of, as a method of control, but we've been able to turn it around and kind of use it against them because we're starting to see things that just don't add up. And more people are starting to pick up on this. This obelisk can be found in Rome. This one can be found in Munich, Germany. This obelisk can be found in Caesarea, Israel. Yes, even Israel has an obelisk. And yes, of course, let's not forget the Washington Monument, which is another obelisk right here in the United States. And what do you see behind it? It's actually, it reminds me very much of the Vatican. Let me find that one. Just the way that the building sits behind this obelisk. You've got this beautiful grand building with a dome. And then here in Washington, D.C., you will see the same thing with the Washington Monument. So you have that in the background. And I know that I finished talking about cathedrals a few minutes ago, but I just wanted to show you what the inside of some of these cathedrals look like, because again, I want you to remember who supposedly built these cathedrals and when they supposedly built them. They built these beautiful, isn't that interesting? The black and white flooring. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'm sure most of you know. Look at this. This was built by a people who were said to have no sorts of advanced technology. I find it very interesting that this floor is also, it may be like a teal green, but I don't know if that's the way the lighting is hitting it. I'm wondering if it's actually black. But again, look at these ceilings. Look at the arches. Look how perfect the insides of these cathedrals look. And again, remember when they were built and who they were built by. Can't go on that one. Let's try this one. I mean, my house, whoever built my house, some of my door frames don't even look like they're completely straight. And my house isn't as old, not even nearly as old as these cathedrals. Yet here they are in all of their perfection. They're exquisite. They are extravagant. And I'm sorry, but I really have a difficult time believing the stories that we are told about many of these buildings that we can see all around us just by a click of the mouse. So to finish things off here, I'm just over here on stolenhistory.org. And I've shown these photos in, I think, one or two of my other videos, but they were from a few years back. So some of you might not have seen them. I'm not going to go through all of them. But what this particular page, which I will leave a link to in the description box, shows you is the similar architectural style in these old world buildings from all over the world. And I'll just show you a few samples from each one. So this is in Japan. There's another one. And as you can already see, it looks very similar to what the buildings that I was just showing you with the columns. Let me see if I can't really click on it as much as I'd like, but with the columns, with the adornment up here, even just the way that the roof is structured, looks very, very similar. And it just took me off that page. Let me go back on here. I think by now I would have all these things figured out how to work them, but I don't. So that's just here. Let's look at this one from Japan also. This is also Japan. All right, so let's move down to Taiwan. Well, look at that. We've got the columns, we've got the roof, the adornment, the dome. This is in Taiwan. Here we have another one. Absolutely beautiful. And again, we have more domes, we have more columns. And many of these style buildings you will find, even in the United States, they tell us that they were built in the 1800s, and this one is in Taiwan. Move down here to Argentina. Boom, we've got another one that looks like with a Grecian style, and people are going to come back and tell me that's classical architecture and all of the technical terms. And you know what? I don't care, because I don't believe that. I don't believe the story behind these different architectural styles just popping up at different times. No, these were built all over the world by the same civilization. Sorry, I didn't mean to get snarky there, but you don't know how often that happens to me. People will come back and tell me, "Oh, well, that's not the right architectural style." Okay, that's fine. I'm not concerned with that. So anyway, so there's the dome, and we've got the columns. You can tell I'm getting tired. All right, and so here we have Cuba. So let's look at Cuba. Beautiful, intricate building in Cuba. Must have been before it became a communist country. Huh. We know they wouldn't build anything like that now unless it was like the president. I probably should keep my mouth shut because I am going to get my video censored soon. More domes. Chile. Let's see. That looks so much like the other one that I'm almost like, is that even the same one? Because again, we have the same adornment, the same column. We've got the arch style windows that are so common in what many people will call Tartarian architecture. And we'll take a look at this one too. Again, I really encourage you to go back and take a look at this website here, because it's amazing, because you wouldn't expect to see buildings like this in some of these countries. Some of them, yes, it's not surprising at all. This is Paraguay. Others, you look at them and you're like, what? I didn't know that they had buildings like that there. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. It must have been built before the World's Fairs told each country what it was supposed to look like. Gaston Avenue Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas. This is also from a World's Fair, obviously. I believe that there were many cities like this in the United States, at least, but also around the world. And they were victimized by these wars, by these great fires, because we're not supposed to know what we're capable of. Here is Russia, and here's one of those arches. And let's just look at the background. We've got a little trolley. We have a building here with the columns. We have some domes in the background. Another one of these, St. Petersburg. I saw this one. I want to go here. I wish I could read that. Absolutely stunning. Looks like a palace of some sort. I keep going on to the buildings with the columns, but I'm realizing that most of them do have the columns. So it's hard. This is Poland. It's hard to stay away from the buildings with the columns because they're just so prevalent in all of these countries. Vietnam. Okay, let's see what we can find in Vietnam. Right away. Boom. Columns. This one here reminds me almost of an arch. Now, this one is obviously a building, but again, many of the same characteristics as the other ones. Pakistan. Absolutely stunning. Built by a people with horse and buggies, right? Yep, that's how they were built, I'm sure. India. Another arch, Calcutta. More columns. There's those good old horse and buggies that were able to transport all of the materials needed to build these buildings. I mean, they must be some really strong horses. Must be really well fed, well taken care of to be able to pull all of the equipment and all of the resources necessary to build these. And even, where do all the people go who are building this stuff? You know that this wasn't a short period of time. And you also have to wonder, did the people live around there? Did they travel there to build these things? How did all this stuff happen? Yeah, and I forgot to mention that this one is in South Africa. This one here is also in South Africa. Again, same type of roof there, same type of columns, arched windows. Looks like we've got a little dome up here, clock tower. Go to Thailand. Okay. This honestly looks like something you'd see in a World's Fair. But it's in Thailand. And I don't think they had World's Fairs there. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Stunning. Go to Turkey. Reminds me very much of an arch. Looks like it's some sort of gate. To actually sit and think about how this could possibly have been built with the storylines that they give us is insane. And I'm at the point now where when people will come back to me and give me the Wikipedia storyline for how these things were built, I don't want to hear it. Because if you are not going to sit and actually think about how that could be logistically possible, this is Sri Lanka, by the way. I'm sorry. I just can't anymore. I've been at this too long that I can't sit and listen to people just spout the Wikipedia story to me as if I never read it and never learned that in school already. Here we have Germany. More of the Grecian style architecture. Notice this dome over here. Let's see how many more countries we still have to go through. Ukraine, China, New Zealand, Singapore, Sweden. Oh my heavens, Betsy. I think we'll be here all night if we go through all of these. So what I am going to do is I am going to just pick out some highlights. So we've got the Ukraine. And I'm going to kind of skip over the European cities because a lot of times you would expect to find that sort of architecture in Europe. But let's go to the places where you might not expect to find it, like in China. So let's take a look at China here. Yep, dome, columns, arched doorways in China. New Zealand was settled by mainly Europeans, but the fact remains that I don't think that they were built by the Europeans. I believe that when the Europeans began settling in New Zealand, these buildings were already here. And I also think that these buildings are likely much, much older than what we've been told. This is Singapore, so let's take a look at this one. And we've got another one here, right in Singapore. Same roof, columns, dome. Looks like arched windows. Sweden, I'm sure they're beautiful. I wish I had time to look at all of them. Indonesia, okay. We've got these huge arches. Absolutely beautiful. This is very similar to, not exactly the same as the others. The others had a pointed top, but again, it's very similar. Kenya. Okay. Here we have the columns. This one does not have the same type of roof, but it does look very similar to the other things that we've been looking at. Egypt. Let's see, which one should we do? Let's do this one because I can see the dome right here. I can see the arches. I don't see any columns on this one, but again, very similar. Got Brazil. We've already looked at some of those. Australia, Canada. Let's look at the Philippines. The Spanish colonial period. We have the dome in there. We have the window that we saw on many of the cathedrals. So this is a church. I just saw that now, and I saw the crosses too. So I'm like, oh, that has to be a church. But that has the dome as well. And is that it? Oh, what is it? Okay. Well, I'm going to leave a link in the description box for this if you wanted to take a look at the rest of these buildings, because it will blow your mind to know that what we typically look at as buildings that are, we'll say, classical architecture or Grecian architecture or whatever they call the type of architecture that you will typically find like over in Rome or Greece, or sometimes even just in Europe in general, which might not be the column style, but will have the sort of features that we would expect from European architecture. You will actually find them that this architecture is all over the world. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's because there was one worldwide civilization that we're just not being told about. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my YouTube membership, I will leave a link in the description box for that, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.